We've been here forever. Part of our traditional stories, our culture, and where we came from, we were already here. It's a place where the ancestors are here no matter where you go. Even though you can't see them, you sense they are here.
Beneath one of the most visited archaeological sites in America, something has been hiding for longer than anyone can explain. Ground-penetrating radar recently revealed a network of underground chambers, channels, and structures sitting beneath Mesa Verde that no one knew existed.
It was a researcher who took more than 20 individuals and dozens of artifacts back in 1891 from what is now Mesa Verde National Park. More than 500 artifacts from 24 tribes in Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona.
For over a century, scientists believed they had mapped every room, every wall, every artifact on that mesa. They were wrong, and what sits underneath may force a complete rewrite of what we thought we knew about ancient North America. What the radar found that nobody expected. In the early 2020s, a research team from the University of Colorado and the National Park Service launched what was supposed to be a routine survey across Mesa Verde, using ground-penetrating radar and airborne LiDAR. The original goal was almost boring. They wanted to update existing surface maps, check erosion patterns, and refine what was already considered one of the most thoroughly documented archaeological sites on the continent. Mesa Verde had been a national park since 1906. Every wall, every potsherd, every kiva had been measured and catalogued with the kind of obsessive care that comes from more than 100 years of continuous study. Generations of archaeologists had built entire careers on the surface record of this one plateau. There was no reason to expect anything new beneath the surface. The technology was a formality, a box to check before the next round of erosion mitigation funding. Then the radar passed over a patch of ground roughly 600 meters southwest of Cliff Palace, and the data stopped making sense. Across nearly 4 hectares of subsurface terrain, at depths between 3 and 12 meters, the instruments picked up a network of voids. These were chambers. The largest measured approximately 9 meters across. The smallest came in around 4 meters. That kind of size consistency does not happen by geological accident. When the team plotted every detected void on a map, the spacing between them followed repeating proportional relationships, not the chaotic, uneven distribution you would expect from water-dissolving rock over thousands of years. And when they checked the orientation of these underground features against the known surface structures above them, something genuinely unsettling emerged. The subsurface chambers aligned to the cardinal directions with the same deliberate precision that the ancestral Puebloans used when they positioned their kivas above ground. Shift the underground map a few meters in any direction or rotate it by 15 degrees, and the alignment collapses completely. At its actual position, it holds perfectly. Natural caves do not mirror the architectural decisions of people who lived on the surface above them. That fact alone turned this from a routine survey into something that nobody on the team was prepared to deal with. And if that does not bother you, consider what it means. Either this is the most extraordinary geological coincidence in the history of North American cave systems, or someone built these chambers with deliberate intent, positioned them in relation to structures that would not exist for centuries, or built the surface structures in deliberate relation to what already lay below. Neither explanation is comfortable. Both demand answers that nobody currently has. We spend our whole lives trusting that the ground beneath us is just ground. Rock and soil and time compressed into something solid and inert. We walk on it without thinking. We build on it without asking what came before. Mesa Verde's visitors have been doing exactly that for over a century, standing on top of something enormous and having absolutely no idea it was there. The scientists running that radar array felt the same certainty everyone else did right up until the moment the data told them they were wrong. And the chambers were not even the most unsettling part of what the radar revealed. A water system that defies the desert. Mesa Verde sits at roughly 8,500 feet in the high desert of southwestern Colorado. Annual rainfall averages about 18 inches, and most of that comes as winter snow. Water has always been the defining constraint of life on that plateau. Every decision the ancestral Puebloans made about where to build, how to farm, and how many people a settlement could sustain was shaped by the relentless scarcity of water. They understood this better than anyone. They built check dams across drainage channels. They carved reservoirs into the mesa top. They constructed terraces to slow runoff and direct every possible drop toward storage. These are some of the most impressive water management features in the pre-contact Americas, and they have been studied in meticulous detail. Between the mid-1990s and early 2000s, a research team led by paleohydrologist Kenneth Wright documented 4 major reservoir systems at Mesa Verde, including Moorfield, Box Elder, and Far View. They found canals, sluice gates, and evidence of repeated dredging across multiple centuries, all confirming that the ancestral Puebloans were sophisticated water engineers who squeezed survival out of a landscape that offered almost nothing for free. Those systems are real, well-dated, and firmly attributed to the Puebloan occupation between roughly 500 and 1300 CE. Nobody disputes them. But the new radar data revealed something beneath all of that documented infrastructure: deeper channels, larger collection points, signals that suggested prepared surfaces on some of the channel walls, possibly lined with materials designed to prevent seepage. That last detail is the one that should keep you up at night. Lined underground channels are not something you stumble into. They require an understanding of how water moves through fractured rock, knowledge of which local materials resist erosion and permeability, and a level of construction planning that goes well beyond digging a trench and hoping water flows through it. You do not accidentally create lined hydraulic channels beneath 12 meters of sandstone. That is engineering. The surface water systems already known at Mesa Verde are scaled to the small communities that lived in the cliff dwellings, groups of maybe 100 to 150 people sharing resources in tight quarters. The subsurface pattern implied infrastructure designed for something much larger, built for greater duration, and operating on a scale that does not match anything in the accepted archaeological record of the mesa. Mesa Verde is not some remote, unstudied corner of the desert. It is one of the most picked-over archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. Entire academic departments have built their reputations on cataloging every potsherd and counting every room. And underneath all of that carefully documented work, there appears to be an entire water management system that nobody knew was there, sitting deeper and older than anything attributed to the people who are supposed to have built everything on that plateau. We tend to assume that ancient people lived at the mercy of their environment, constantly struggling, barely surviving. That assumption feels natural because it flatters the modern world. We have technology, they had rocks and bone. But a lined subsurface hydraulic network beneath a high desert plateau tells a completely different story. It tells a story of people who understood their environment so deeply and so precisely that they engineered solutions we are only now able to detect. Solutions we did not even know existed until machines capable of seeing through solid rock were dragged across the surface. If the subsurface water system predates the known occupation, it means someone understood this landscape at a level that the accepted timeline does not account for, and the implications of that reach far beyond one mesa in Colorado. It means our model of who lived in the ancient Southwest and what they could accomplish needs serious re-examination. The timeline problem nobody wants to talk about. Carbon dating is the backbone of archaeological chronology. You find organic material, you measure the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12, and you get a date. The process is straightforward, well-tested, and reliable. But it requires physical samples. And because this entire survey was non-invasive, meaning no digging, no drilling, no excavation of any kind, no direct samples were pulled from the underground chambers. So the team could not simply date what they found and settle the matter. But the radar data told a story of its own, and it was not a simple one. Reflections from fill sequences inside some of the chambers showed depth and stratification patterns that were difficult to reconcile with an occupation lasting only from roughly 500 to 1300 CE. The layering was too deep and too complex for a 700-year window, especially in chambers that appeared to predate the known construction above them. Something had been accumulating down there for a very long time before the ancestral Puebloans ever laid their first stone on the mesa top. And then the old excavation notes resurfaced, and this is where the story takes a turn that should make you deeply uncomfortable. In the 1960s and 1970s, archaeologists conducting standard test trenches in several mesa-top locations recorded anomalous burned layers sitting below the expected Puebloan cultural sequence. At the time, no one knew what to do with those findings. They did not fit any recognized occupation period. There was no interpretive framework that could explain carbonized material beneath the earliest known Puebloan deposits. So the archaeologists did what scientists sometimes do when data does not match theory. They noted the anomalies, filed the reports, and moved on to questions they could actually answer. In at least 2 of those old excavation records, the diggers described something even more specific that deserves your full attention. They found tool marks on what appeared to be the roof lines of subsurface features. The marks were smoother and more regular than the percussion and abrasion patterns left by the stone tools found throughout every confirmed ancestral Puebloan construction site. Stone tools leave rough, irregular signatures because that is the nature of fracturing rock against rock. Whatever made these marks produced cleaner cuts with more consistent depth. The excavators noted this, puzzled over it briefly in their field journals, and then buried the observation in their reports because there was nowhere for it to go in the accepted narrative. No one was looking for evidence of a pre-Puebloan construction culture at Mesa Verde. The idea did not exist in the academic vocabulary of the time. Those notes sat in university archives for decades. Nobody looked at them again because nobody had a reason to. When the new radar data arrived in the 2000s and 20s and showed a network of underground features in the same general area where those old trenches had been dug, the archived observations suddenly stopped looking like isolated curiosities. They started looking like the first pieces of a puzzle that nobody had realized was sitting on the table the entire time. There is something deeply unsettling about the idea that answers can be found and then lost. Not because they were destroyed, but because nobody was ready to hear them. Those 1960s excavators did their jobs. They recorded what they saw. They described it carefully. And then the information went into a filing cabinet and stayed there because the scientific community of that era had no category for it. The burned layers did not fit the Puebloan timeline, so they were treated as contamination or anomaly. The tool marks did not match known lithic technology, so they were noted and set aside. Evidence does not disappear when it is filed, but it becomes functionally invisible when no one has a reason to look for it. The burned layers, the tool marks, the deep stratification, and the radar returns all point in the same uncomfortable direction. Something was happening beneath Mesa Verde before the ancestral Puebloans arrived, and whatever it was not simple, it was not accidental, and it left traces that were found, documented, and then forgotten for half a century because the questions those traces raised had no home in the accepted story. The memory that never needed proof. There is a detail in ancestral Puebloan architecture that most visitors walk right past without giving it a second thought. In the floor of every traditional kiva, there is a small hole. It is called a sipapu. Most guidebooks describe it as a symbolic feature representing the place of emergence, the point where humanity climbed up from the worlds below into the present surface world. Hopi oral traditions and related narratives among Keres-speaking peoples describe this emergence in vivid, layered detail. Humanity did not begin on the surface. People lived underground first, moving upward through successive worlds until they reached the one we occupy now. The sipapu is the physical reminder that the connection between those worlds has never been severed, not diminished by time, not weakened by distance, not made irrelevant by modern life. Kept open, on purpose, in every ceremonial space, across every generation. For most of the 20th century, Western archaeology treated these accounts with respectful distance. Scholars acknowledged them as meaningful cosmology, as deeply held spiritual beliefs, as culturally important metaphor, but not as literal geography, not as something you could verify with instruments, not as testimony that might correspond to physical features beneath the ground. The very people whose ancestors built the cliff dwellings have been saying, consistently and without interruption, that there is a world beneath the world. They did not whisper it. They did not hide it. They placed a physical marker of that knowledge in every single ceremonial space they constructed. They did not treat it as myth or legend or a charming old story for children. They treated it as a fact of existence, important enough to architecturally encode in every kiva floor, generation after generation, century after century, from the time the dwellings were first occupied through the present day. A senior Pueblo cultural specialist who has been involved in consultation work at the park for years has stated it plainly. The sipapu is not decoration. It is not a nod to an outdated worldview. It is a threshold kept open in every ceremonial space because the connection to what lies below remains real and alive. That is not the language of someone describing a metaphor. That is the language of someone describing something they know to be true, because their entire cultural lineage has maintained the knowledge. And now, ground-penetrating radar has found a network of artificial-looking chambers directly beneath the mesa where those kivas stand. The very instruments that Western science built to see through stone are returning images that correspond to stories that Western science spent a century politely filing under mythology. Nobody needs to claim the oral traditions predicted the radar data. But it would take a very committed skeptic to look at both sets of information and insist there is nothing to discuss. There is a deep irony in the fact that Western science spent a century building increasingly sophisticated instruments to detect things that the descendant communities never lost track of in the first place. Billions of dollars in satellite technology, radar systems, and computer processing were required to produce data that confirms what the grandmothers have been passing down in ceremonial spaces for longer than any university has existed. The descendants preserved what the instruments confirmed. The grandmothers never stopped saying what was down there. The machines just finally learned to listen. And maybe the real lesson here is not about radar or archaeology at all. Maybe it is about whose knowledge we choose to take seriously and how long it takes for institutions to catch up with what communities have always known. Why this changes more than one mesa. If the subsurface network turns out to be artificial and older than the ancestral Puebloan occupation, the consequences ripple outward across the entire field of North American archaeology. The American Southwest is not some neglected academic backwater. It contains some of the most intensively researched archaeological landscapes on Earth. Chaco Canyon with its great houses and road systems stretching across the San Juan Basin. The Hohokam Canal networks in the Phoenix Basin, some stretching over 1,000 miles in total length and representing one of the largest pre-industrial irrigation systems ever documented. The Mogollon cliff dwellings of the Gila Wilderness. These sites form a dense, well-documented record of indigenous civilization spanning thousands of years. An entire prior infrastructure beneath Mesa Verde, one that left little recognized surface signature and used construction techniques distinct from what came after, would mean that the existing timeline has a gap. Not a small gap, not a footnote. A gap large enough to contain a culture capable of underground engineering, hydraulic design, and architectural planning that does not appear anywhere else in the regional record. That kind of omission does not happen because the evidence was never there. It happens because the tools to detect the evidence did not exist until recently, and because the assumptions built on those limited tools became so entrenched that nobody thought to look for something different. And this is not the first time that exact pattern has played out at a supposedly well-known site. LiDAR surveys over the Maya lowlands in Guatemala revealed entire cities, complete with roads, reservoirs, elevated causeways, and defensive fortifications hidden beneath jungle canopy that archaeologists had walked over for 100 years. Near Stonehenge, magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar detected previously invisible henges and ceremonial avenues that transformed understanding of how the entire landscape was organized and used. At Angkor in Cambodia, airborne laser scanning showed that the famous temple complex was merely the ceremonial core of an urban network that extended for hundreds of square miles in every direction, supporting a population that dwarfed previous estimates. In every single one of these cases, the story was identical. The site was considered thoroughly studied. The official record was treated as essentially complete. Careers had been built and textbooks had been written around the assumption that the major discoveries had already been made. And then new sensing technology arrived and showed that the surface maps had always been partial views of something much larger, much older, and much more complex than anyone assumed. Every single time this has happened, the reaction from the academic community has followed the same arc. Initial skepticism, then cautious acknowledgement, then a slow and sometimes painful revision of textbooks and tenure-track assumptions. The people who built their reputations on the old maps never welcomed the new data with open arms. That is human nature. But the data does not care about reputations, and eventually the evidence wins, because evidence always wins when it is strong enough and consistent enough. Mesa Verde now joins that list, but with a critical difference. At the Maya sites and at Angkor, the hidden features belonged to the same cultures already known. They were more of the same, just at a scale nobody expected. At Mesa Verde, the missing piece does not appear to be more ancestral Pueblo and construction in a deeper layer. It appears to be something else entirely, something with different construction signatures, different engineering approaches, and no clear parallel in the existing record. What stands between discovery and answers? The research team has proposed targeted micro-excavation at the perimeter of the subsurface network. Small-scale, carefully planned extraction of sediment and any organic material that might exist in the fill layers of the outermost chambers. If they can pull even a few grams of datable carbon from inside those voids, the timeline question begins to resolve. If the dates come back within the ancestral Puebloan range, the explanation shifts toward unknown deeper construction by the same people who built the cliff dwellings, which would itself be a major revision of the existing record. If the dates come back significantly earlier, every existing assumption about who lived on this mesa and when they arrived will need to be reconsidered from the ground up. But that excavation has not happened yet, and there are reasons for the delay that go beyond logistics and funding, reasons that matter deeply and that deserve your respect, even if the wait is frustrating. Mesa Verde is sacred ground. The modern Pueblo peoples, including Hopi, Zuni, Acoma, and others, maintain deep cultural connections to the site and exercise federally recognized consultation rights over any research conducted there. Excavation is not just a scientific decision. It is a cultural and ethical one. Previous generations of archaeologists removed thousands of artifacts and human remains from sites across the Southwest with little or no consultation, treating indigenous heritage as raw material for academic careers. The damage from those actions is still being repaired through repatriation efforts and relationship rebuilding that continues to this day. Any new digging at Mesa Verde will require not just permits and funding, but genuine partnership with the descendant communities whose ancestors built what stands above ground and whose traditions describe what lies below. That process takes time, and it should take time. Rushing into excavation to satisfy curiosity while dismissing the voices of the people most connected to the site would repeat mistakes that the field has spent decades trying to correct. The radar data is not going anywhere. The subsurface features have been there for centuries at minimum. They can wait for the work to be done properly, with the right people at the table and the right protocols in place. Alternative explanations also remain on the table. Natural voids misread through pattern recognition. Fill sequences misinterpreted by radar in unusual geological conditions. Tool mark descriptions from 50-year-old field notes that are qualitative rather than quantitative and may not hold up under modern re-examination. The most conservative reading of the evidence cannot be dismissed, and good science demands that it is tested before bolder conclusions are drawn. But the growing weight of converging signals makes it increasingly difficult to treat all of these data points as coincidence. The chambers are too regular. The alignment is too precise. The water channels are too engineered. The old excavation notes are too specific. And the oral traditions are too consistent. Each piece alone might be explained away. Together, they form a pattern that demands investigation. The foundation is still being written. There is a particular kind of certainty that comes with thorough documentation. When you have measured every room, cataloged every tool, dated every hearth, and published every finding in peer-reviewed journals, it becomes almost instinctive to believe that the record is complete. Mesa Verde has been that kind of site for over 100 years. 500,000 visitors walk through it annually, read the plaques, take the guided tours, and leave believing they have seen the whole story. The archaeologists who spent their careers there were meticulous, dedicated, and honest in their work. They documented everything their tools allowed them to see. The problem was never carelessness or incompetence. The problem was that the instruments available for most of the 20th century simply could not detect what lay beneath the visible surface. And when your instruments define the boundary of what is knowable, that boundary starts to feel like the boundary of what exists. That limitation shaped the narrative in ways nobody recognized at the time. When your tools only see the top few feet of soil, your story only covers what happened in the top few feet of soil. Everything deeper becomes invisible, and invisible things do not make it into the textbooks. The ancestral Puebloans became the beginning and end of the Mesa Verde story, because they were the beginning and end of what the available technology could reveal. Now the instruments have changed. Ground-penetrating radar can see through 12 meters of rock and sediment. LiDAR can strip away vegetation and reveal landforms that the naked eye would never catch. And the data coming back from Mesa Verde is saying, clearly and consistently, that there is more beneath this plateau than anyone put into the official record. We do not yet know who built the underground features, or when, or why. We do not know if the chambers were living spaces, ceremonial centers, storage facilities, or something that does not map neatly onto any familiar category. We do not know how the subsurface water system connected to the surface systems that came later, or whether the ancestral Puebloans knew about the older infrastructure when they chose this specific mesa as their home. Every one of those questions requires physical evidence that has not yet been collected, and patience while it is collected the right way. But we do know this. The oral traditions of the descendant peoples have always described a world beneath the world. They encoded that knowledge in stone, in architecture, in ceremony, and in the living memory of their communities. And now, machines designed to see through solid rock have found structured, organized, non-random features directly beneath the place where those traditions were kept alive for centuries. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are extraordinary. They represent ingenuity, community, and survival against a landscape that offered almost nothing easily. But they are not the beginning of the story. They are a chapter in a book that turns out to be much longer, much older, and much more layered than anyone realized. The pages beneath them are only just starting to be read. And what is already visible on those pages suggests that the history of this continent holds far more than what made it into any textbook. Every generation believes it has finally completed the map. Every generation turns out to be wrong. The archaeologists of the early 1900s thought they had Mesa Verde figured out when they cataloged the cliff dwellings. The mid-century researchers thought they completed the picture when they added the mesa top sites and agricultural terraces. The Wright team in the 1990s expanded the story again with the reservoir systems. Each layer of discovery felt like the final one until the next set of instruments showed that the bottom of the story had not yet been reached. We may be watching that same pattern play out again right now, in real time, with technology that can finally see what has always been there but was never visible before. And if history is any guide, what lies beneath Mesa Verde is only the beginning of a much larger correction to what we think we know about who was here, when they arrived, and what they were capable of building. The foundation under Mesa Verde is still being written, and whatever it reveals when it is finally read in full may change not just what we know about one mesa in Colorado, but what we understand about the entire ancient world. Drop a comment and tell us what you think is really hiding beneath Mesa Verde and whether science will ever fully uncover it. If this one kept you watching, hit subscribe, because what we are covering next is going to change the way you see everything you thought you knew about the ancient world.